welcome to Fantasy View, a podcast about reviews for fantasy novels. I'm Jason Hubbard. People, I have a confession to make. I kinda sorta made an impulse buy on the Kindle online store. I don't remember what I was looking around for specifically, but I saw a certain something and I got it. It's a box set with 6 fantasy novels, of which there is no box to speak of since it's all digital. So, what's the matter with this? Well, all the books are stories about fairies. You know, little peoples with wings that fly around rainbows and lollipops, spreading pixie dust as they go. Now, I don't actively search for stories about fairies. That's just not my bag. If I happen to read a story that has fairies in it, it's incidental. A Schooled in Magic, for example, has fairies in 2 brief parts which I didn't see coming. But normally, I don't seek out anything that is exclusively about fairies or anything of the like. And I am definitely not a brony. I'm more of a strawberry shortcake kind of guy. You might want to forget I said that. Anyway, the only thing I can say in my defense about getting this box set is it was only 99 cents. 6 books for only 99 cents. I mean, come on, there's got to be plenty of people out there who bought crazier things just because it was at a price like that. Now, maybe you got Sonic the Hedgehog 06 just because it was only $5. And then you played it expecting Mach speed thrills, only to get nothing but a glitchy mess and Sonic hitting on a realistic-looking 15-year-old girl. Think Roger Rabbit sucking face with one of the Olsen twins, and there you go. Well, since I got it, I thought maybe a few of the stories would at least be pretty bad and would make for an entertaining review on this podcast. I decided to start out with the one book that caught my eye the most. The title is Fairy Metal Thunder, because with a name like that, you just can't go wrong. The cover illustration is of a teenage girl with an electric guitar. She has that punk rocker look with heavy makeup and long blue-dyed hair. And of course, she has a pair of purple butterfly wings attached to her back. She doesn't seem little, but that doesn't matter. This is clearly a book about fairies. The author is J.L. Bryan. I like to think the initials stand for Justice Loving, or maybe Juicy Loins. The electric guitar and the story description indicate that this story is about rock and roll. And since I like rock and roll, I thought that the element of music would help make this the most tolerable of the 6 books. Well, bring out your paintbrush and color me surprised, because I ended up really liking this story. I know, right? I mean, I must have taken a hit to the head, which I don't remember. Or maybe I picked up a nasty bug somewhere, and it's highly contagious. And it can travel through the internet. The first 2 chapters of this book gave me that after-school special kind of vibe. You know, those live-action kids shows that are meant to deliver important life lessons while also being hip and cool. And doing it in the cheesiest way possible. That's what Fairy Metal Thunder seemed like as the main character goes to a friend's house to practice with the band he's in. I suspected that somewhere down the line he was going to learn something like, drugs are bad, or don't be mean to your friends, or maybe listen to your parents and put down that hammer. But before long, I got a different kind of vibe. The story seemed like that of a typical CGI animated movie. Not any of those straight-to-DVD releases. Those can go straight to hell. No, I mean anything from Pixar and DreamWorks and Blue Sky Studios. And you might as well throw Disney in there too. But just forget Frozen, because please do. I can't take that song any more times. The book's story is full of whimsy and colorful characters, literally, just like many CGI animated movies. It's a meeting of realism and fantasy, with a plot that's character-driven, and it includes a few quirky moments. The only real difference is that the book lacks the usual high-flying antics peppered throughout CGI movies, except for the very ending, I suppose. But that's okay, since antics are usually better suited for movies and not books, due to the nature of the 2 mediums. The main character's name is Jason, so automatically he's my favorite. He's a 17-year-old who starts off the day with band practice. He plays guitar, with Mitch on keyboard and Dread, or short for Mildred, on drums. Plus there's the singer with the harmonica named Aaron, that's spelled Erin, whom Jason has a huge crush on. But of course, Erin already has a boyfriend named Zach, who is, get this, an underwear model, and he's totally a male bimbo. A mimbo, if you will. The band practices a few songs, and then Zach comes and demands that Erin accompany him on a fundraiser drive in an airheaded, I'm too cool for everyone else kind of way. That night at dinner with his family, Jason is told to go to the house of Miss Dullahan, who's an old woman who's been letting her lawn grow wild, presumably because she's getting along in her years and can't do such work anymore. At this point, I believed I knew what was coming up next. Jason was going to cut Miss Dullahan's lawn, and somewhere in her house, whether Miss Dullahan shows it to him or not, he was going to find a bit of magic that was going to help the band and get him some serious brownie points with Erin. Instead, something quite different happens. He goes up to Miss Dullahan's door, and she tells him to scram. So he does, and he goes off to practice with the band instead. Later that night, Jason's sister Katie tells him that she saw a monster in their parents' room. Jason thinks she's making things up, but it turns out there's actually a goblin in that room, going through their mother's jewelry. Jason gives chase all the way to Miss Dullahan's lawn, where he discovers a small door set into a tree. He goes through it, growing smaller along the way, and ends up in the world of the folk, which is the various creatures found in old Celtic lore. He finds the goblin, plus a bunch of fairies and some ogres running around in this mysterious world. In a nearby town, he spots a music band consisting of 2 fairies, an ogre, and a satyr. The music they play is entrancing, so much so that a group of nearby humans are dancing to their heart's content. The goblin says that they dance because they can't help it, and their dancing gives energy that fuels the world's magic. Once they stop dancing, they disappear, going back to Earth. Jason, who is hardly a rebel, let alone a thief, decides to steal the instruments once the band actually leaves them unattended. He then rushes back to the door leading to Earth and puts the instruments away in a safe place. He then gets grounded by his parents for leaving his sister alone at the house. Even though he was in the world of the folk for a few minutes, several hours had passed by on Earth. As you can guess, Jason gives the instruments to his bandmates because the notes they make bring out such raw, passionate emotion to whoever hears them. The instruments also adapt to their players, so even though they start out as classical pieces, they transform into instruments of rock and roll. And even though the band members had needed a lot of practice to hit their stride, the magic of the instruments turns them into excellent players. One YouTube video later, and yes, I mean the video is literally on YouTube, and the band is bigger than John Lennon, turning Jason and his mates into instantly recognizable music stars. But playing the instruments comes at a price, for it takes special training to use them properly, and since the band doesn't have that, it leads to potentially deadly side effects. So the story is full of whimsy and magic, but it's the human drama that really makes this story shine. The main character is a shy young man and obedient to a fault. When his parents not only ground him, but tell him to quit the band and get a real job, I couldn't help but think it was totally not cool of them. And as I said, Jason is not a rebel, so he takes his grounding very seriously and tells Mitch that he can't come over for band practice anymore. I was practically screaming at him, in my head of course, that he was old enough to start standing up for himself. He can't just quit the band because of a little grounding. Mitch ends up saying something similar, only not so preachy and heavy-handed, which I can respect. But it was Jason's crush on Erin that really delivered the emotional punches, especially since the author writes about it in a rather realistic fashion. Jason is very shy, and it shows in the way he talks to Erin in clipped sentences. And one time he ends up playing with a wrinkled piece of paper when she's sitting next to him, a classic behavior that reflects embarrassed, unrequited love. Erin, truth be told, isn't a very complex character, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. She's just a nice girl who has a passion for music, and she's told that she has real talent. She's not judgmental nor opinionated, which might have helped her to be fleshed out, but at least the other band members pick up the slack in that department. Erin mostly comes across as non-threatening, so it's easy to see why Jason would be into her. When Jason invites her to his house to show her the fairy instruments, I had a bad feeling that the instruments would prove to be nothing special, or maybe their magic didn't work on Earth. And if that happened, Erin would think of him as extremely weird, and so Jason would have to win her over by bringing her to the fairy world to show where he got the instruments. So, does that happen? I'll just leave it to you to find out. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fairy door, the band whose instruments got stolen reported the theft, and they learned that the queen of the land, named Mad Queen Mob, doesn't sense the presence of the instruments in the fairy world, meaning that they must be in the world of man. This breaks the supreme law, stating that no magic may cross the boundaries between worlds. The queen tasks the fairy band to find the instruments on their own, and they must pay for any expenses out of their own pockets. I honestly felt bad for them at times, because not only is theft a real problem that anyone can experience, but facing expenses that you really don't want to pay is another one. The fairy band hires an old elf who has 3 pet unicorns with names like Buttercream and Honeycake. Sounds like My Little Pony, sure, but I didn't mind because this isn't My Little Pony. This is simply a fantasy world that comes from Celtic lore that, like I said, has lifelike problems. As the elf hunts for the instruments and the fairy band falls on hard times, I wanted for both the fairies to get their instruments back and Jason's band to hold on to them for a little while longer. If a story can pull off that kind of emotional tug-of-war, then it's certainly doing something right. This book has a suggested age rating of 14 and up, but I think you can lower that to 10. So this book is roughly at a 6th grade level, which is something you should take into consideration. Perhaps because of this age level, the narrative is a little dry and matter-of-factly, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm just used to narratives that read like op-eds, but this book allows you to decide for yourself how to feel about the characters, rather than tell you how to feel. And as a side note, I just want to say this book isn't really all that old. It's got references to YouTube and Facebook, Britney Spears and Justin Bieber. I just threw up in my mouth a little. My recommendation is simple. If you like movies like Toy Story, Shrek, and Bolt, then this book might be right up your alley. I know that a lot of grown-ups like these kinds of movies, as long as they're well told and have plenty of bite to them, which is a fitting description of Fairy Metal Thunder. As a matter of fact, I think the story is good enough to warrant its own movie adaptation. It could be Pixar's first music-based movie, like Blues Brothers and School of Rock. Of course, the story would have to be retold to make it suit the movie format, especially since the book is the first part of a 5-part series. I believe so strongly that there should be a movie adaptation that I'm going to tweet this episode of Fantasy View to John Lasseter 10,000 times until he gets the hint. Or until I get bored of doing that. I don't know. I'm Jason Hubbard. Thanks for listening to Fantasy View. And please, keep reading.